used to say to my kids when they were in middle school is I was like, you're in training right now to have more freedom in high school. So do it well. Like if you're sneaking out and doing stupid things in middle school, then you're not going to get to go to Red Rocks by yourself in high school. You know, like this is like all prepping for more freedom.
I love to capitalize on the dopamine piece because I think it's good to teach our kids, but also to teach ourselves to have multiple sources of dopamine, because when it's just electronics or social media, it's devastating. And so I love what you're saying, like different kids need different levels of boundaries around that dopamine hit, but to understand the impact of dopamine on our brain and that we can get it, we can source it in so many places, and to have like a toolbox of multiple choices of dopamine sources, I think is so important. Can I just punctuate what you're doing is amazing, because I want listeners to hear that. I love that you give the limits. Again, responsibility versus fear. There's responsibility to give limits. And then I love that like 2-year before you leave the nest piece. And I've heard that before of like, okay, practice what we've given you, but you're going to fall on your face and pick it yourself back up again multiple times so that they don't actually leave without having learned that under your roof.
I'm Dr. Jenni Skyler.
I'm Daniel Lebowitz, and we are clinical sex and relationship therapists. We take you behind the scenes on sex therapy and the ideas we work with.
Join us as we dive deeper into the psyche behind the sex.
So,
Clothing.
What's our fear? What's our responsibility? What is sexuality and like freedom of expression? What is sexualization that they need to learn and understand, especially for you? You've got girls and there's a lot of male gaze. I feel like boys, they're not as like objectified. I mean, maybe they're objectified. Maybe you should challenge me on this. There's the looks maxing piece too. But I'm just curious about when you have a young, let's say middle school girl or high school girl, and they want to wear very revealing clothing. What is that line between freedom of expression versus teaching them as a responsibility to understand what they're signaling and the repercussions of that?
Okay. It's one of my favorite conversations. So this brings up so many shadowy layers within us. Fear of judgment, fear of unwanted attention, fear of our child being attention seeking. All of that is, again, kind of how you said it, Daniel, like when it's fear-based, it's inward. So I actually have some questions that I love, and I just pulled them up. I'm just going to ask them because I think it's important to ask yourself these questions, and I can send this to you for the show notes or whatever. But so some of the questions I love are, how am I getting hooked by gender stereotyping? Have I explained to my kids that no matter what they wear, people will make a quick snapshot decision based on them? And that how powerless that is of them, and of us, but that is the reality of being in the world. That doesn't mean that we have to conform to what other people think, but we do need to know that. Have we discussed the importance of not judging others for the way they're dressed, that there's a lot more to people? Have you explained that it's okay and normal to want to feel attractive? And that doesn't mean you want to have sex or that you are attention seeking. That is a very normal behavior and need of humans. Have we discussed how industries will promote clothing to the pop culture that is historically based on typically the traditional male gaze, like you said, with an old message of men feeling entitled to women's bodies? That's a really big one, because then it's kind of just a conversation. And then, I think another big one is, how do we talk about like just the industry around clothing, around fast fashion and things like that? So that's kind of a big, broad conversation to have with yourself, to have with your family, whatever. And then it's again about the pause, right? It's like when the instincts are get back upstairs, that outfit is inappropriate, which comes out of a lot of people's mouths, mine included. And then, but what the magic is to learn how to pause and slow it all down and start coming back to what's happening inside so that we can guide our kids. Now, that does not mean that there's not going to be a moment where you're like, that is just not a school outfit. Like, and so then we go to the conversations like this one I love. So I have to think about what I ask. Is this weather appropriate? Okay. Like literally, is it weather appropriate? Because like if you're wearing a really short skirt and flip-flops in a snowy day, like, I don't know, that just doesn't seem smart, you know? And then we're moving away from like the whole sexualization piece. Do the clothes fit you? Like that is actually a very fair question. Like, you know, are your shorts like too tight? Because that means we need to go shopping. It doesn't mean that they're too short. It just means that they're actually not fitting you anymore. Do you feel comfortable in the clothes? And that was kind of what was touched upon before. Like what Daniel, I think you said, like, where is the line between what they've been messaged and what's real for them? And I think that is an ongoing conversation. And then the other thing is like, is it appropriate for the thing that you're doing? So a conversation we have in our house a lot is there's like daytime clothes, there's nighttime clothes, there's school clothes, there's concert clothes, you know, and it's really important to just have a distinction. Like I have a concert persona that comes out that is way different than how I show up in my office, you know, and that's because that's my vibe. And we have different parts of us that come alive and we want to actually honor those parts of us, but it really matters the environment you're in. So let's see, I think those are like the main questions I like to ask. And then I also think the conversation around like self-respect is really big around, and again, this is going to be different line for every parent. So it's an inside job of like, what are my values around this? But personally, I have chosen that I am not going to micromanage my kids' clothes. Like that is one place that I feel I want them to have full expression. And for whatever it's worth, I don't know if maybe because I haven't micromanaged, there hasn't been a lot of push for things outside of our value system. I mean, the style of crop tops and, you know, short shorts or whatever was that's not really a sexual thing so much. It's a style thing. It's like what's in style for a lot of these kiddos. They're selling it. You can't go to Target without finding like crop tops everywhere. Right. And so I think there was moments where I just like leaned into like, wow, it's like a lot of skin, you know, showing. And then there was moments where I was like, hey, that to me feels a little more summery than going to school right now. And they were like, yeah, you're right. And I don't know if it's that because my approach was kind of gentle and non-judgmental that I had a little more influence, which is what we want, right? We want to influence our kiddos, but it's always been a conversation. And even as you see me kind of stumbling, it's a hard one. It's a really hard conversation because it's just not black and white. It's like situational. And sometimes it has to do with my mood or their moods at the time. And anyway, I'm rambling. Sorry.
No, it's great.
Well, it's funny. I'm actually reflecting on a parallel conversation I had with our older son about investing and his choice around some birthday money and how does he want to invest it. And he had some ideas and some of the ideas were really good and some were just, he doesn't have a larger reference point. And I think struggling with I'm not responsible for his decisions, but I am, and where's that line? And I think part of what I hear you saying and this is the tension I was trying to navigate, which is you're trying to build up awareness of their choice, right?
Yes.
You're going to make choices over your life. And I don't get to control what those choices are because you go out and live your life in the world. But the piece this is where my responsibility comes back. Like as a parent, I have a responsibility to help make sure you are listening to yourself around your choice.
Yes. Yes.
And if you feel clear about that, and if you understand what you are choosing to the best of your ability, I think that's a lot more reassuring. And so how can I make sure that you really understand the choice you're making and then feel confident in that choice?
Yes. Yes. That was such a nice reframe or reflection.
Well, it's hard though.
It's so hard because what you're saying is it's our job to teach critical thinking.
Totally.
And I think at the end of the day, that is what we do. And when we can do it, even from a confused place, we're creating an environment in the home that's like, let's just keep looking within. And, I don't know what your response was to when I said, people make a snapshot decision based on how you look. Like when we've had those conversations at a young age with both my girls in middle school, it was one of the best conversations we've ever had, because I was like, I'm not saying this is right or fair, but this is how the world works. And I want you to know that. And so your clothing is an expression of self. And kind of going back to what I said around concerts, like sometimes we want to express ourselves in a different way. And sometimes we want to look a certain way because that's how we're feeling. And that's okay. Just be deliberate about it and do it for you, versus that this is just the trend, or this is what everyone else is doing, because that's really important. And actually, there's been a couple moments where both my kids learned the hard way that they felt judged by adults based on how they were dressed. And they both came home at different times. One was from like an old family friend that they felt judged by. And we just got to explore it. And I was like, well, what does that say about them? And what does that say about you? Like, what did that feel like to feel judged? And one of my kids is like, honestly, it made me not want to wear these shorts around adults. And I was like, okay, then notice that, because there's actually probably some wisdom in that moment where you don't want to feel judged. So then you're going to create an environment where you don't feel judged per se, or you want to be seen differently. The other thing I have said to my kids is, if you're going to choose to look like we in sweatpants, like in school, which they're all wearing lots of hoodies, and they look like, sometimes my kids literally look like they're in their pajamas. I'm like, then it's really important that your teacher knows who you are. So that means that I would encourage you to sit in the front, introduce yourself to the teacher, if it's the first day of school or something. Like, I want you to have those social skills so that you're seen for your smarts and who you are as a person, rather than just your clothing. So if you're choosing to dress a certain way, your personality has to come out more.
Yeah.
But that's maybe also your fear of like, wait, see my kid for their intellect.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. It is. It's my own projection, but it's part of my value system too.
Yes, totally.
Well, or
totally.
To play devil's advocate, you have a responsibility to help them understand how their actions have reactions in the world. Yeah. And so there's a balance there. Some of it is fear and some of it is a responsibility, and separating one from the other, it can get really messy. And it's probably, you're going to mess it up more than you're going to get it right. And you have to go back and clean it up.
Exactly. And there have been so many moments where I have like called or texted later in the day and been like, hey, I think my reaction was a little judgy and probably didn't feel so good. I just like to own that. And I almost always get a text back like, thanks, mommy. When I have a repair, they mommy me. It's so cute.
I love that.
I know, it's really a funny little thing I've been noticing. And then when something happens, like it happened in my house this morning, where Tess was actually making a judgmental comment about one of my friends, and I had a strong reaction to it. And then she sent me a text 2 hours later that's like, hey, Mom, what I said didn't even make sense, and I'm really sorry. Those are her exact words. And there we go. Like, that's all I want, is for us to like know when we've misstepped, repair it, and move on.
That's all you need.
Totally.
That's all we need. And that happens with everything. That happens in sexual relationships. That happens in how we dress. It happens in experimental process. It just happens.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it's really so beautiful to watch them grow. If we can get out of the scared mindset that it's all really out of our control, and actually own that, like, yeah, there's so much out of our control, but we can feel secure in our presence and our responsibility. Watching them bloom and become who they are is like, literally, it's like the most amazing thing to witness. Yeah.
Amazing.
The two things I'm like taking away of like from both of you, as well as teaching our kids, like I think the two gifts are to be critical thinkers and conscious children, conscious humans. Like if they have that, like they're armed and ready. Social media, do you tell parents to deconstruct social media with them? Do you look at profiles and like allow for curiosity? Like how, or do you just not micromanage and you're just like, all right, here's social media, go forth?
So what I have done, I waited until they were 14, just for developmental journey around any social media. So I think that's really essential. And then I had limits. And so I personally did not micromanage what they watched or anything like that. I did micromanage how much time they had on them, because I think so much of the research will actually back this up, that it's really around like that short amount of time and how to turn that off. So that's where I was really strict until junior year for Sage. I took off her limits, and I was basically like, you have 2 years under my roof to understand how you metabolize without any limits, and actually she put limits back on after a month, which I thought was really cool. She overrides them often, but she at least has some kind of indicator like, ooh, I've been on my phone too much. And it's just a conversation, but I'm sorry.
No, I love that. Can I just punctuate what you're doing is amazing, because I want listeners to hear that. I love that you give the limits. Again, responsibility versus fear. There's responsibility to give limits. And then I love that like 2 year before you leave the nest piece. And I've heard that before of like, okay, practice what we've given you, but you're going to fall on your face and pick it yourself back up again multiple times so that they don't actually leave without having learned that under your roof.
Totally. Thank you for saying that. Because if she went off to college and suddenly had no limits and had her phone in her room, which is right, it's like, that just feels scary. So now I can sometimes, if I notice her mood's off or she just seems really apathetic, I'll look at her hours and be like, hey, do you think there's a correlation happening here? And then it's a conversation. But to your point of like what they're looking at, I think it's really important for parents to be involved in their online world as much as their real-time world. So the way I like to do that is when my kids were first just playing around with YouTube, right? That was their first introduction. Every now and then I'd be like, what lights you up? Like, what are you watching? And I would like go and watch with them. And it would be like cats, it was like such dumb shit. I was like, okay, this is pretty innocent. Now, granted, they might not have been showing me everything, but I actually kind of feel like they had all the books. They had us as like open questions at any time. They asked me lots of questions when they didn't know what something was called or whatever. That I don't know. I didn't feel that scared about it. We had a lot of conversations about catfishing and not to like share and never to do naked pics. And they were like, Mom, we are not dumb. Like, we are not going to do naked pics and we watched videos on that, like here and there. I didn't like jam it down their throat, but I definitely like gave them enough little reminders of how bad it can go. But what I did most was when it came into Instagram world, we just share things with each other. Like, what are some things that you think I would like or something you would like? A lot of times it's recipes or like a mother-daughter thing. My kids will send me like cute little things. So, and I didn't realize this until it was already happening. But when I asked them to share cute things that they thought I would like, it was changing their algorithm. Because they were then like searching cute things and like, recipe or whatever. And then the other day, actually, Tess is like, I have so many like mother, like love your mother things that are coming up on my algorithm. I was like, that's good. So I don't know. It's a fine line, and it really is kid dependent. There are kids out there with like a lot of neurodivergencies that are going to have a lot of dopamine effects that need a different kind of managing. So I really want to acknowledge that too, that it's a different kind of parenting, and there does need to be more boundaries in certain situations with certain kids. But again, this is going to be about reading your kid, like changing the rules, every 3 or 4 months to kind of see where we're at. And it's not like this is it and now we're done. It's like, we're going to keep learning how to be citizens of this tech world that is very hard for all of us to metabolize. And it is our job 1,000% to be the adults in the room, because that is a place I actually think parents are way more lenient in the online world and way stricter in their real-time world. And that kids actually need more freedom to be like out in the world and, you know, go get me groceries or go play in the neighborhood until dark. That's okay. We're going to learn how to do these things out in the world. Stay in touch, you know, show me a proof of life picture. I love that, like POL. And that is all training them for when they're juniors and seniors and sophomores of like, what's your curfew? Like, you know, you've showed me your responsibility, that I don't need to have like a hardcore curfew for you now. I just need to know that you're going to stay in touch with me and make good choices. And so it's all building, right?
I love that.
One last thing I used to say to my kids when they were in middle school is I was like, you're in training right now to have more freedom in high school. So do it well. Like if you're sneaking out and doing stupid things in middle school, then you're not going to get to go to Red Rocks by yourself in high school. You know, like this is like all prepping for more freedom. Okay. Sorry.
I love that.
That's awesome. Yeah. Incentivizing responsibility and autonomy is huge.
Huge.
Yes.
Huge.
Yes.
And not overdoing it, because I know you got to go. I just want to say, I love to capitalize on the dopamine piece, because I think it's good to teach our kids, but also to teach ourselves to have multiple sources of dopamine, because when it's just electronics or social media, it's devastating. And so I love what you're saying, like different kids need different levels of boundaries around that dopamine hit, but to understand the impact of dopamine on our brain, and that we can get it, we can source it in so many places, and to have like a toolbox of multiple choices of dopamine sources, I think is so important.
I love the way you said that. I'm going to use that. That's
Steal it.
Great way to put it. That's multiple sources. I love that. Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Deb, we adore you.
Thank you so much.
I want to just hang out
Giant hug.
Well, come visit. You come up here sometimes, don't you, in the summer?
Yes. I'm going to try and come this summer. I will, for sure.
Okay.
Awesome.
For our listeners in the meantime, how can they find you?
Okay, so I have a website, debrubin.com. I have Instagram. I think it's called Deb Rubin Parenting. Yeah, I just changed it recently. There's reels and all sorts of stuff. I do a newsletter once a month. I do not overwhelm people's inboxes, but you can get on my newsletter through my website or through Instagram. And I'm doing, like I said, this cool virtual workshop in 2 weeks on May 13th. It's a Wednesday night virtual for any 8th grade parents, all genders welcome, just for the parents. It's a 2-hour workshop. It's affordable. It's $100. And it's just a chance to get educated about how to feel secure as you transition into the next chapter. So those are my things. And and if anyone wants to email or just chat, I like to make myself really available. So
awesome.
Love it. Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thanks for listening to Sex and the Psyche. Please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen. It is because of you, the dedicated listener, that we get to grow the show and give you the content you love.
Next week, we have Karen Bigman teaching us about what men need to know about menopause. That conversation will be very interesting. Don't miss it.
We'll catch you next time.